food. Can we grow enough of it? Can we grow it sustainably? Can we afford it? If you're like me, you've seen the amount of food in your grocery bag decrease with the price continuing to increase. Hello, I'm Stuart McNish, and you're listening to Conversations Live. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series addressing the big issues of our time. For each episode, we bring together subject matter experts for a deep conversation designed to provide you with information that helps you make more informed decisions. I hope you enjoy it. Tonight we come to you from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, who have lived on and continue to call these lands home. Osiem. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series that seeks to advance our understanding of the big issues of our times. We also strive to draw attention to organizations that make a difference in our province. Tonight, I want to introduce you to Special Olympics, an organization that changes lives and the world by changing language and actions of inclusion to end discrimination against people with intellectual disabilities. Joining us from Special Olympics tonight are Karen Reed and Amanda Leo, and I encourage you to check out this incredible organization, and if you can at all, find ways to support them. Remarkable work that they do. Turning now to the focus of this evening, food, the sustenance of life, a major contributor to our economy, a significant contributor to greenhouse gas production, and a large part of a family's budget. According to Robert Sake, the author of the book Food 5.0, How We Feed the Future, between now and 2050, he says we have to grow the equivalent of the past 10,000 years worth of food if we hope to meet the dietary needs of 9.1 billion people by 2050. He says to do so, we have to increase food productivity by 60 to 70% globally. We also need to embrace science, advanced genetics and technology, rethink our agricultural practices, increase food security, grow more and improve agriculture's environmental footprint, reduce food waste, and of course ensure that food is affordable. It's a big task. Tonight we ask, does BC have to grow all of its own food? Can we? We talk boldly about a commitment to food production, but are we moving fast enough and in enough directions to secure our food supply? Is it realistic to think that we can live without food from around the world to fill in the gaps in production here? We have an impressive panel that will address these questions and pose new ones. They are, to my right, Peter Dillon, the chair of Ocean Spray, the president of Richberry Group, and he was one of the co-chairs of the BC Security Task Force. John Anderson, the CEO of Oppenheimer Group, who is joining us remotely. You'll see him on the screen down there shortly. Lenore Newman, the co-author of Dinner on Mars. If you can grow food there, you can grow food anywhere. And she is the director of the University of the Fraser Valley's Food and Agriculture Institute. Matthew, here we go. Dahiba. No, I got it wrong, didn't I? Dabier. There we go. Matthew Dabier of Catalera Biosolutions. Apologies. Sue Paul Ball of the BC Agriculture Council and the BC Cherry Growers, and David Guthrie of KPMG. We have an action-packed agenda. Now, just before we begin, I'm going to express my wholehearted and heartfelt gratitude to our sponsors who make this evening possible. Throughout the event, you will see their logos appear on the screen. Hopefully you can remember who these wonderful organizations are, because without their support this evening and this long-form public affairs dialogue series would not be possible. One last thing for anyone who wishes to pose a question, whether here in the audience or online, please go to slido.com, enter the passcode conversations, and then send in your question. Sean, our Slido master, will be receiving your questions and then bringing them forward to us. And while we won't be able to get to all of the questions, your questions do help to inform me about topics and questions that will be asked throughout the evening. Now, to further set the stage, here is Mario Canseco of Research Co., who just conducted a poll about our response to higher grocery prices and what we believe are the reasons for the soaring costs at the supermarket cash register. RF, can you please play Mario's video?
Canadians are definitely noticing a heftier supermarket bill. More than 7 in 10 told us that they are paying more for vegetables, fruits, chicken, and beef than they did 6 months ago. And about 2/3 also report higher prices for bread, cereal, and frozen meals. Canadians aged 55 and over are more likely to notice that these items are more expensive now than at the end of 2023, and there is no region of the country where more than 1 in 10 residents feel that grocery costs are lower. 1/3 of Canadians blame the actions of governments when thinking about reasons to explain the rising cost of food. About 1 in 4 believe supermarkets and grocers are mostly to blame, while fewer than 1 in 5 take issue with manufacturers and suppliers and global political conflicts. Fewer than 1 in 10 Canadians point the finger at labor and supply setbacks, climate change, or the actions of farmers and growers. Canadians are taking action to save money. More than half say they are purchasing items at different stores instead of at a single one, or have switched packaged food brands to lower-priced alternatives to deal with inflation. The use of apps to collect points at a retailer, online coupons, and printed coupons has also risen, particularly among Canadians aged 35 to 54. Only 17% of Canadians confide to have boycotted a specific retailer because of how expensive their offerings have become. While only 1/3 of Canadians are dissatisfied with governments when thinking about the high cost of food, the appetite for action on 2 separate fronts is significantly higher. 4 in 5 Canadians believe that the federal government can do a lot to help lower the cost of groceries, and 3 in 4 feel the same way about their local government. Canadians of all political stripes and ethnicities believe elected officials have a role to play in helping Canadians who are struggling to cover the cost of food. Higher food prices are forcing Canadians to change their purchasing decisions, which can also have an effect on nutrition. Across the country, 1/3 of Canadians admit that their diet has not been healthy over the past 2 months, a number that rises to 44% among Atlantic Canadians, 36% among those in the lowest household income bracket, 37% among women, and 37% among Canadians aged 35 to 54. For Conversations Live, I'm Mario Canseco from Research Co.
Thank you, Mario. In listening to his poll results, obviously the price of groceries is affecting people, and they're looking for answers. So, now just before we turn to the panel, I want to play one other video that will help, I believe, kick off this evening, and to talk about and address what the concept of sustainability in agriculture is. RF, can you please play the clip from Lisa Ashton of RBC's Climate Action Institute, where she explains from their perspective what food sustainability means?
Food sustainability and sustainability in agriculture is really a balance across those 3 pillars: economic, environment, and social. As Canadian agriculture continues to grow and to meet our growing demands, we know that balance is going to have to be maintained, because we know that we can't have good yields without good soil health. We know it's increasingly challenging to invest in climate resiliency if the finances are not in check or incentives are not available. So maintaining that balance is really what sustainability is.
Lenore, I'd like to start with you. I saw you getting ready to just jump right in there.
All right, I guess so.
But is this the right perspective? Should we be looking, saying, oh yeah, sustainability has to be at the top of our list?
I think we do need to always keep sustainability at the top of the list, with the one caveat that means all parts of sustainability. And the Dutch sometimes call this the triple or quadruple helix model, depending on who you talk to. What that means to me, yes, obviously environmental sustainability has to be top of mind. And we also need social sustainability. Things have to be fair. But we also need economic sustainability. And I think that one falls off the radar sometimes. And to me, that means two things. Number one, the people who process and produce our food have to be able to make a living, or they will quit doing it. And number two, we have to be able to afford food, or really the wheels come off society if we can't afford food. So, yes, sustainability, but only if it's all of sustainability.
Peter, your thoughts on where the most important area that we need to focus on as we try and strive to meet our nutritional needs here in British Columbia?
I was just going to say whatever she said, I'm good with. Yeah. So, I agree with Lenore, especially her third point about the economics of growing food. It is very challenging. I'll tell you, farmers today are struggling everywhere. Of every food dollar that's spent in the U.S., only 7 cents goes back to the farmer.
Only 7.
93 cents of every food dollar is spent between leaving the farm to the shelf. And, when we look at this crisis, believe me, if we all believe that there's a climate crisis, let me tell you, there's a food crisis as well. And so when we look at this, why is that much money being spent? It goes to the cost of food. That supply chain has gotten out of control, and we need to step back, rethink how we fix that. We also have to look at how do we make our growers more sustainable in every way, from environmentally, how can they do things differently, but also financially, how do they survive? Because I will tell you, there are more and more farmers today going under than you realize. In the US, 80% of farms are not making money. And the 20% of farms that are making money, 10% are corporately owned. And the other 10% are big family farms. And the trend is those family farms are becoming less and less, and corporate farms are growing bigger and bigger. So, we have, I think, a food crisis, whether we recognize it or not.
Well, Sue Paul, you deal with this constantly. You're with cherry growers and also the, producers here in British Columbia. Your response to what Peter's saying about how difficult it is and the challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, no, thanks, Stuart. Yeah, what Peter and Lenore alluded to is exactly correct, that it's pretty dire with the current situation. So being a cherry producer, it's a very sensitive crop. I haven't come across too many people that don't like cherries. They are delicious, and we do produce some of the best cherries in the world. But that production has really come into question since 2020 with the extreme weather events. So without a doubt, the biggest threat to the producers is extreme climate. So how I can explain is outside is our office. And imagine in your office if somebody was just cranking the thermostat, lighting your office on fire, extreme situations like that. I don't think it'd be very productive, at work. And that's kind of what's happening with agriculture, with polar vortex, the heat dome in 2021. And then in the Fraser Valley, we saw the atmospheric river that caused so much damage. And we've seen now 2 more freeze events in the Okanagan. And sadly, why I have time to be here tonight is because our cherry crop was completely wiped out. That's how dire the situation is. Not only cherries, but grapes, peaches. So it is a really dire situation. And where there's so many areas in the food system that we do need to focus on and improve with processing as well, so that we have the products that are produced to get to the market. But it does start on the field and right in the orchards and right across the province is where we need to start.
John, thanks for joining us remotely. Is it practical for us to ever even consider that we could meet our food needs in British Columbia without being able to reach out to producers around the world?
We talk about weather. Well, we talk about the winter weather. We can't grow product here in the winter.
So we source products right now from over 30 countries around the world, and we produce over 50 million cases, and we ship to about 20 different countries around the world, and a lot of product here into North America. And I'll echo what Peter and they all had to say. Our producers around the world are financially struggling. I have a grower in Oregon talking about cherries. They have 3,500 acres of cherries. They're a 100-year-old company, and the last 3 years have been extremely difficult. Not just from weather, but also from crops from other areas, and just really the sale of the product at retail, and the costs of producing the product now. The fertilizers, the pesticides, if you use pesticides, integrated pest management, all the different methods that we use to try to get the best product to the market, all are costing a lot more. And you might think inflation's come down, but things went up 20%, and we got another 3 or 4% on top of the 20. That cost that came there before hasn't gone away. So no, there's no way that we could possibly do that without having product from around the world to feed ourselves, and especially our kind of product, because it's healthy. So if you start saying, I don't want to bring that product here from another part of the world because I think it's got a problem with the carbon footprint, you won't have that product during the wintertime. And not just that, we've done some studies on carbon footprints. I did a study on a piece of kiwi fruit from New Zealand all the way to Kelowna. And the biggest carbon footprint, believe it or not, was from the store to the house, because it's one box or one kiwi fruit going across compared to an entire shipload that's spread across. So, and the weather around the world is affecting everybody everywhere. I'd like to say this year it's settling down just a little bit, but it has been volatile.
So we're in a situation where we need to produce more. Soil science plays an important part in that. Matthew, maybe you can share what it is that Catalera does and how you're working to help improve the situation for food producers.
Yeah, absolutely. So Catalera is focused very squarely on trying to provide new and beneficial biological inputs for growers. So as opposed to using synthetic chemistry, or maybe even thinking about it from the perspective of supplementing synthetic chemistry, which does have a detrimental effect on soil and microorganisms, we're trying to use biological solutions, plant-based solutions, microbial solutions to try and provide growers with the types of tools that they need to be successful in their business and growing their crops. And quite frankly, it is a very difficult situation. We heard about economic challenges. We heard about climate challenges. I think growers are facing a situation where they have far less tools available to them today. And tools continue to be removed from that toolbox over time. So our mission is really to think differently around how can we utilize nature and unlock that intelligence in nature to bring these biological solutions to refill the grower toolbox and ultimately help them produce the amount of food that we need, and to do it in a sustainable and economic way.
This is made in BC.
This
science.
is Vancouver-based.
So this is a product that you then get to not only help local producers, but you get to export your products and systems.
So it's interesting you bring that up. I had a conversation in the hallway about this. Local, no, unfortunately, and that has to do with regulatory issues in Canada. But we do, the main product market for us is in the United States.
Okay.
So we can come back to that, or I can elaborate now if you like.
Elaborate, because I want to come to a clip from Leila Uznakan from Invest Vancouver, because what you're doing, and Lenore, I know you're going to want to follow up, and David, I'll get to you in just a moment, but this is an important element of what we can be doing
Yeah, I mean, simply put, I think governments around the world, regulatory agencies around the world are trying to understand the biological space. It's relatively nascent. It's basically 1/10 of the existing chemical crop protection industry. And so there is a lot of effort from government to try and figure out, how do we regulate this different type of crop protection product? How do we have a framework that works for companies like mine to be able to bring new innovation to market, but at the same time protect the needs of the public and the environment? And so there is, I think, an implicit sort of understanding that biological products are going to be more sustainable and safer for the environment. But I think regulators are still trying to wrap their heads around that and try and apply a data-driven sort of scientific-backed approach to how they evaluate new products. And so just by virtue of the way the regulatory system in Canada is right now, that's an easier thing for us to do in the United States to pass that hurdle. Brazil is a world leader in new biological products. They have an average time of getting biological products to market of less than 12 months. In the US, it's probably about 2 to 3 years. In Canada, 5, and Europe, longer than that. So
You're committed to staying here, though.
we are, yeah. We've actually been here for over a decade, so it's, Vancouver is home.
Good. Arav, can you play the clip from Leila? Because she speaks about the vast economic potential that the kind of work that Matthew and his team are doing poses to or brings to the BC economy.
Agriculture is the oldest profession in the world with the greatest upside potential. Stu, we already saw quite a bit of an investment in the last decade. Just here in the Lower Mainland, our food tech and agri-tech companies attracted about $1.45 billion. That's a significant investment, but it's really just the beginning, right? And we should not rest. Like, those are the great numbers, but we also have to be aware 2024 is not kind to any sector. It's not so easy to attract investment right now, and agri-tech and food tech are getting a little bit of more of downturn. Traditionally, historically, you would have 2% of all the investment dollar goes to agri-tech. Now we are seeing the first quarter of 2024, maybe 1.6%. So, there's a room for everybody to step in. Private and public sector alike have a role to play. So we need to create that ecosystem where these technologies can be put on the market a little bit faster. So the adoption of technology, the pace of that adoption is increased, so that our farmers and producers can, feel less exposed to risk when they try something new. So that we reach those economies of scale where the price of those new technologies go down, right? We are not talking only about food security, we are also talking about affordability. If technology is too expensive, then there's a little bit of longer path to walk.
Lenore, I know that this is a big issue for you. So, and David, I'm coming right to you afterwards, okay? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it is. I earlier outside described my career as yelling about food and yelling about policy and regulation, which kind of feels that way some days. And a friend of mine summed it up really well. And he's an entrepreneur, and he said to me, I need this province to either give me a fast yes or a fast no. Because if it's a fast yes, I'll get to business. If it's a fast no, at least I know where I stand. But this is the province of the slow maybe. And ever since he said that, it's been stuck in my head that we have to fast track our regulatory processes. And we've seen that in other parts of the world. And I think about alternative proteins, which I work in. Some places, such as Italy, have said, no, we don't want anything to do with it. At least you know where you stand. Now, if you're an entrepreneur in Italy, it's a problem. South Korea has said, we're creating a zone where you can just do whatever you want because we want to see this move forward. And I think more importantly to everyone in this room, Alberta has figured out our regulatory processes are slow. And a couple weeks ago, they flew a bunch of us back to Banff just to sit in a room and hear their pitch. And their pitch was like, hey, we think we're building a really great environment for innovators, for companies, and you guys should all come here. I'm like, wait, no. And I think we need to get serious and move away from the slow maybe on a lot of fronts. And a lot of people have heard me talk about, land use and some of the land regulations, but it goes right through the whole system to what you're doing, to what we're all doing. We need to figure this piece of the puzzle out.
David.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm going to circle back to the economics of sustainability. And so ag technologies are really exciting. There's a lot of great products out there, but at the end of the day, if producers or processors can't afford to invest in that technology, makes it very difficult to get that adoption increase to help, ultimately either produce more food, help lower prices. So comes back around to economic sustainability and also being in an environment where, is it government or is it industry that is really driving that investment to make it easier for companies to invest, or do we need to cut regulation, things like that? And we see this across the whole food value chain. Doesn't matter if you're a producer or a food processor.
Matthew.
Just maybe wanted to jump in and say I agree. We need to get to fast yes or no answers. And I think just to respond about cutting regulation, that I think could work in some cases. One thing, though, that I do actually applaud the Canadian Regulatory Agency and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada about for is creating what they're calling a regulatory sandbox. And this is sort of a relatively new concept that allows us to not necessarily cut regulation, but to create a safe space for new product innovation to happen. And I think that's something that if we can see more of that, we can see more opportunity for innovation to actually reach the market faster. So I do want to say that, I think that is a great thing to be working towards.
John, on the note of investing in new technology, new ways of growing food, how challenging is it to do it here in British Columbia versus, let's say, Saskatchewan or in the United States? Because I know that you're investing in new food production in a variety of different jurisdictions.
Yes, for sure. So the big one we have going up in BC right now is called Up Vertical Farms. So it's an acre of land that is like a warehouse. It's a facility that uses 99% less agricultural land, 99% less fresh water, 99% less fertilizer than traditional farming. Zero pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and it's never touched by human hands until it actually hits the retail. But the costs of us being able to have to get it to where it is right now, it's struggling. And we're slowly getting retail to pick up on it, and they're slowly getting things worked out. But on these new technologies, they take time, and so that takes money. So that one we're continuing to support. Down in California, I'm doing a thing called hydroponically grown strawberries. So they're in troughs above the ground, so they're like 4 feet above the ground, and there's plastic hoops over the entire strawberry field. What that does is it allows us to environmentally control the situation better. It doesn't keep the rain off of it. Also for the labor, they're at 4 feet. They're not bending over on the ground. It's at a real comfortable level and area. And then we can also pump the right nutrients into the right berries in the right place at the right time. Again, struggling financially to keep that thing going. We've got some major retailers on it, but a lot of others haven't come so far. And the next one we're working on is in Saskatchewan, is with a company called Deep Energy. It'll be a geothermal plant energy. So all of our power will come from the geothermal plant, thousands of feet underneath the ground. And so our heat and our light and our electricity, everything will come to us absolutely free. So we're looking at starting out with 20 acres of greenhouse and then predicting maybe up to 80. But again, the investment has to be there to start it off with. So in Saskatchewan, for example, the government's coming to the party to help out because they recognize they need to look at new type of energies to be able to help produce food. And this particular facility is in Estevan, so it's one of the sunniest places, believe it or not. So it's got sun year round. It just gets really cold there in the winter, so you can't afford to heat it unless you have this geothermal energy. So we're doing this in a lot of different areas. We're trying a bunch of different pack types as well. Like we have an earth-friendly product that is made out of European beechwood that goes back into the land in your home in 12 weeks. But it's costly to produce and it's slow to get uptake by the consumer. So there's just a couple examples of some of the things we're doing. We're constantly looking at new varieties of grapes and stone fruit and berries and apples and kiwis and tomatoes and peppers and doing organically things, doing pest management control things to try to different ways to see how we can get more effective, better yields, better quality of product that'll last longer. But it all takes money and time. And quite often we're sitting there now finding that the banks are not patient enough. And we as an organization have had to help fund a lot of organizations around the world keep going so these projects don't fall.
You know, just recently, BC Food and Beverage released its State of the Industry report. And in it, they talk about the role the government needs to play in supporting this kind of innovation to help de-risk projects. Peter, how important is it that government get involved in helping producers meet these challenges with innovative new methods and practices, but also meet the financial risks and challenges that they face?
Very important. Our friend, Mr. Donaldson, the CEO of Food and Beverages, is here as well. So I'll maybe take some of your thunder away here. But listen, I think the report was just fabulous. It hit on all the challenges that the industry, the association, their members are facing. And, you know, government's got to play a bigger role. And you know, it's harder to get them to come to the table, but they are. And back to what Lenore said, but they got to move faster because other jurisdictions are coming and taking processors, other businesses away from BC, and we're really falling behind. And when we had our task force report done in 2020. We were, I think, at the front end of the movement. And it seemed that we were out of the gates before everybody else. But now, as time has gone on, many jurisdictions have gotten ahead of us. You know, just sorry to digress a little bit, but the province of Quebec. When I'm back in Quebec, I have the politicians saying, hey, thank you very much for your report. It's fabulous. We've adopted it. And today, Quebec, leafy greens, very cold in the winter, as we all know, they produce 50% of the leafy greens that they consume in Quebec because the government got behind them.
Based on your report?
Yeah. Yeah.
Lenore, you were involved in that too, weren't you? Yeah.
And so they're really putting their money behind the industry and understanding that food security is very important. We need to start stepping it up here as well.
David, then Sukhpal, I know that you had your hand up too. And John, and then I'll come back to you.
And just a quick comment on that. You think like other countries are being bold in their food production, and you think of Singapore trying to improve their production of food domestically. Then the government came out with a very bold plan. Now, is it going to be successful? We'll see. But at least they're taking those steps, and very bold steps.
Sukhpal.
Yeah, I wanted to build on that government investment side of things, and yeah, interesting to hear how Quebec just kind of said, "Hey, we'll take that report and work with it." So, with this freeze that the cherry industry had in the Okanagan since mid-January, I've been just trying to meet with government and advocate that desperately support is needed. It's a worthy industry, not only cherries but soft fruits, all tree fruits, and the response is, you'll just have to stay within the framework of the money that's currently available. There isn't going to be extra money. And then more recently with the work that the staff at the BC Agricultural Council have done is they dove into what are the provinces across Canada spending in terms of the GDP that ag generates within your province. How much is reinvested back into the province? Because farmers, we're great at saying, hey, things aren't working. But that other side of it of, solutions and, getting that information, that's where we definitely need to improve. So I was just floored when I saw this, that British Columbia ranks last place. 2.5% of the GDP that is generated from ag gets reinvested. We are absolutely last right across the country. We'd have to invest another $60 million just to catch New Brunswick. Let that sink in, because I was speechless for a few moments. So all the stuff we're talking about, this innovative technology, what John is talking about of what they're trying to do to be more efficient, it costs a lot of money. So the real question, it's not there's no money in the budget, it's the money was not put in the budget in the first place. So that's what we, as now British Columbians, have to really be advocating to our officials that, hey, I want to see a stronger investment in agriculture. We want to see better food production because, as we've seen in the news, a housing crisis right across the country. and Peter alluded to a farming crisis. Just imagine in the news if you replace the housing with food crisis. We don't have enough food. We hadn't been investing. We should have done this. And then at the political level, they'll be pointing fingers. Hey, you didn't invest. No, you didn't invest, right? But the public here and across British Columbia should be demanding that we invest we don't even have to be first place. I was competitive. I love being first place. And trust me, winning is great, but I'd settle for getting in the middle of the pack. And you'd be amazed what we could see from production throughout British Columbia if we even got to midway and put that money into all facets of agri-food production processing.
John, I know you had your hand up. You wanted to comment on this as well.
Yeah, I did. I'm going to talk a little bit more outside of BC and talk federally, but so I'm the chairman of the board of the International Fresh Produce Association based in Washington, D.C. We watch what goes on around the world. And recently, there was a huge amount of protests in Europe in all the major cities. The farmers are completely in uproar because they're looking to reduce the amount of nitrogen and fertilizer to 25%. And they've all said, we can't grow anything with that. We're all going to go broke. And so there was massive protests. Well, we in Canada now, under the current government, have adopted that policy. So by 2030 and starting in 2026, we have to reduce the amount of nitrogen and fertilizer. So we got to be careful that we don't have government putting roadblocks in the way. I have no problem in trying to look for alternate ways, but let's not get rid of these before we have the alternate ways. And then the other one was Trudeau government came out with banning all plastics in produce by 2026. Well, that's not possible. If you do, you'll have a massive issue with food quality, food safety, and the ability to get the product to the market. And you'll have a consumption fall down as opposed to rise up. And so we've got to be careful. And I had a Liberal cabinet minister speak, I won't say his name, came to a convention here in Vancouver. And we were talking about regulation when I raised these things with him. He says, the bureaucrats that put these things together really don't understand what they're doing. You need to help them. You need to educate them to make sure they don't put these things forward. That's why I get involved in some of these associations. But I just think we have a job to do there with all levels of government.
You remind me, Michael, that Michael Bloomberg said, farming's easy. Anybody can do it. You just have to dig a hole in the ground, plant a seed, and cover it over and give it some water. Is this part of the challenge, that we've got people who are in positions of authority creating policy that isn't reflective of the world in which we live? David, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you think I've got younger kids, and, the kind of the theme that, kids think the food is just grown in the grocery store. It's not. It actually grows in the fields, and it has to go through the supply chain and makes its way to the grocery store. So it's, there's a whole piece around education of where the food comes from, the metrics around it, the financial aspect of it, and all the way what is hitting the consumer's pocket at the end of the day.
I want to go to Slido. Sean, we have a question here that I think is interesting, and it helps us to understand some of the challenges that we have here at home in producing our own food.
Thanks, Stuart. It's from Colin Doyland. Abroad, locally produced food is cheaper than its imported counterpart. However, in Canada, it seems locally produced food is more expensive than imported and processed food. How can Canada, both government and industry, flip this around?
Peter, this is a really interesting challenge, isn't it?
Sure is. Yeah.
And you have the answer, of course.
Well, I don't know if I have the answer, but I'll tell you, one of the reasons food is a little bit more expensive here that's grown here is because the finishing goods of that food are sent elsewhere to get finished, and then they're brought back here. So just think we're losing processors. They're going to other jurisdictions for whatever the reasons are. And if you're trucking food 1,000 or 2,000 miles away, having it finished and then trucking it back, one, it's bad for the environment, but two, it's going to be a lot more costly. And that's what we're doing. We're growing, but we don't have the next steps in place here to deal with some of the issues that we're seeing right now hitting the food industry is around processing. And at the end of the day, the consumer is the one that's actually having to pay the extra dollar for it. But I think at the end here is what really kind of concerns me and Stuart, I don't know if you're going to talk about it or not, but I'm going to say it now anyways, is the fact that countries are starting to close their borders. We're talking about export of food. And, we heard California a few years ago with the water crisis talk about stopping its production, leaving the state because they were worried about feeding Californians. But just this past summer, India is the largest rice exporter in the world. And they banned export of rice because they're worried about feeding their own people, let alone feeding the rest of the world. And so we're seeing this climate crisis everywhere. We're seeing food production dropping. And what really worries me is borders closing. And as we rely on a lot of exports of food, I think we really need to start thinking about how do we grow local? How do we process local? How do we feed local? Because I think, with the way the world is geopolitically, I'm worried one day food can be used as a weapon as well. So we really got to imagine how we can build a much more resilient food system than we have today.
Well, going back to the BC Food and Beverage State of the Industry report, they point out the fact that the cost of land and access to land for processing plants in British Columbia is exceptionally high. Arav, can you play the clip from Alex Mitchell, who says, okay, let's start rethinking about the way that we're using especially marginal agricultural lands?
The ways of doing farming have shifted substantially in the past number of years. We're seeing more and more ag tech, and we're seeing, new ways of production. Food processing is critical, and so one of the things that we're advocating for is for the modernization of the ALR to allow farmers to be able to process their food nearby where they're processing it, and that requires shifting in the regulatory regime that really looks at removing some of the land that is not good for agriculture. We see some poor soil quality parcels that could be leveraged for agri-industrial land uses, which is exciting and a great opportunity for our local economy, especially in the context of a complete shortage of industrial land.
Lenore, is she right?
Yes, although the weird thing, when the ALR was established in 1973, it was supposed to include the whole field-to-table process. And that's why there's so much of it. Half the land in the Lower Mainland is ALR. Only about half that is used for farming. I doubt much of the fallow will ever be brought into production because a lot of it's pretty challenging. But what we saw over the years, so in Dave Barrett, who created the thing in the first place, and if he didn't, we probably wouldn't have food production in Lower Mainland, he said very famously, there's no point growing strawberries if you can't make jam. And so it was included, and it was created as an agricultural production and processing zone. But over the years, that mandate drifted, and about 20 years ago, we put in regulations that effectively killed processing on the ALR. At first, wasn't a crisis because people just moved on to industrial land, but that's a big problem because number one, we don't have any. We have less industrial land than almost any other major port city on earth, and we're rapidly running out. And number two, the other day I was talking to one of the business groups who does industrial land, and he said, look, agricultural processing doesn't belong there. They can't compete against big industry because the margins are lower and the capital investment's really high. And also, they need really intensive services compared to, say, an Amazon delivery terminal. They need electricity, they need water, and they create smells, they create food hazards. They should be with the rest of the agriculture. So it's a drum I beat really often. This is one of those places where if we could change a couple of lines of the regulation to put it back the way it's supposed to be so that processing of food products was with the rest of the agriculture, unlocks a whole bunch of problems all at once. And maybe keeps a few of those processors here instead of Alberta.
David.
Yeah, I think if we're got to feed a rising population, we need to think differently. From a housing crisis, you can build up. Processing food, not so much. So we need the land, we need to be efficient, and we need to find different ways of approaching where are we going to produce and process our food.
So, Paul, you run into that challenge as well, don't you?
Yeah, when I just hear ALR, I'm thinking, how much time do we have here? Right? It's a big topic, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. But basically, the intention of preserving that farmland, I'm behind. But what happened to it over the 50 years now? It just turned 50 years this past year. Is that the farming side of it disappeared. It wasn't about making the farmer sustainable. It was, we've got the land, we've got it locked in there. Let's move on to something else. Those farmers, they've always been around, right? So that attitude has to change. And I'm of the view that actually the ALR has to be kind of brought down to the frame and rebuilt, understanding what agriculture is now 50 years later. It's not the same what it was in 1973, right? But no government since have not been bold enough to say, hey, this ALR land, we have more people using it as residential than we have people farming it, right? That's a fact. But the public will say, we love ALR. It keeps our farming alive. If I can actually say that ALR is actually not about farming. If you kind of think about it, it's not about farming. Point number 2 after preserving the land is encouraging farming. Unfortunately, we probably don't have the resources to get to point 2. We've been just focused on making sure the land just stays as agriculture. So that's why I say this is a really big topic that governments don't really want to open up that can of worms, because there's a lot of work. Your hands are going to have to get dirty. But that's what's going to be needed, because there is land that would make more sense to have processing on it. And agritourism, for example, I don't understand why that's such an evil thing of having people come and visit our farms to see where we grow our food. Our family partakes in some agritourism, and we were looked at as very bad people of taking our food and making it into meals and hosting people at our farm. All that money we generate goes back into our operation to buy tickets for workers that fly out here to harvest our crops, etc. So that's why it's a very big topic that I have some ideas. Those on the panel have some great ideas, but it's going to take some strong leadership. And we have a government that actually brought in the ALR sitting right now. So what other better government to say, hey, we need to fix this. It's time. It's been 50 years. But us in ag are still waiting for that call to come to the table and make the proper changes that are needed.
So, John, through some of the companies that you're associated with, you've run into this, and you've found some innovative ways of dealing with some of those rules and regulations. How have you been able to navigate a path for some of your associate companies to be able to try and do innovative things on agricultural land?
Yeah, I mean, more so in other countries than we have been able to do here. But yeah, we have to get involved. We use industry associations to get involved and bring to the table what's
happening in other jurisdictions and say, why can't we do that in this jurisdiction? And it is based on how we're going to grow in the land. In some cases, we've said, look, we're going to grow organically here, or look, we're going to do integrated pest control management systems here. We're not going to have pesticides. So there's different ways to approach the jurisdictions. And if you think about what's happening in Saskatchewan, there's no greenhouses there in that part of the world, but we're tying it to a geothermal plant, which then says, okay, let's let you do both, because you're doing something here that's better for the environment as well. So I think there's obviously all of it's to do with government and levels of government around the world. There are some countries that really push behind agriculture because a lot of their industry, a lot of their dollars and revenues come from agriculture. Like you look at Chile and Peru and Mexico, there's a ton of stuff that comes out of there to feed the rest of the world. So they're more apt to want to listen to what we're saying, allowing us to plant in different ways in different times in different places, and actually put water systems in place to allow there to be sufficient water for us to grow the product.
Matthew, Bill Gates famously said, science can solve all of our problems. But in talking to you, it's not that easy, is it? As you've already pointed out, you're developing scientific approaches to address some of these food production challenges. 5 years to get a permit to use it here in Canada. But the challenges are even more immense than that, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think really what we're trying to do is find a way to use biology, in our case, to solve some of these traditional challenges that have been traditionally solved through the use of synthetic chemistries. Biology is inherently more complex than chemistry. And my apology to anybody who's a chemist, but there's just so many interactions that happen in a biological system that, our understanding as a species really is, we're only scratching the surface. And I think from our perspective, we're trying to deal with complexity. And we've had to actually invest a lot in systems and processes and, R&D infrastructure to actually be able to deal with that complexity. So, for us, we've needed to have very elaborate growth chambers that allow us to look at how does a particular biological product interact with a pest? How does it interact with a plant? How does it interact with environmental variables? And these are things that, in other industries, like maybe pharmaceuticals, you think about human interaction, the human body. Yes, there's a lot of variation in all of us, and that makes for challenging drug development, but you don't have to worry about soil. You don't have to worry about weather. You don't have to worry about different climate factors. So I actually think, what we do is very complex. And so we've had to invest quite significantly in that. And that what that means is that the R&D cycles, to your point, even before you get to regulation, are quite lengthy. And we're investing, in some cases 2, 3, 4 years just to get a prototype or product concept to a point where then we can take it to the field and then we can start to think about regulatory processes. So, it's a very long timeline to get new innovations to market.
Well, and you're not even talking about a genetic modification of the plant itself.
No, not even thinking about that. So then how does, for example, a microbial product interact with a genetically modified plant variant versus a wild native variant? There's just so many variables in play.
Lenore, where are we at on the discussion around GMO?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's largely over, and at least in a sort of cosmic sense. So there is no question first generation transgenic crosses where we had cats that glowed in the dark, and I really wanted one of those, by the way. It didn't go well for the companies that to be honest, were a little uncareful in the early days. But when we talk about CRISPR, when we talk about genomics that is targeted, we're really talking about how we're going to feed the future. We've been doing genetic modification for 10,000 years. Ever since we selected seed varieties, we've been deep in. And I'm known as being really unapologetic on this, but the truth is there is no scientific evidence in the literature of harm from GMOs. It just blew up into a public story. It's a great cautionary tale of doing bad PR and watching it blow back on you. But young people, as a rule, are not concerned. They eat GMOs every day. They're kind of used to it. It's a bit of yesterday's news. Now, it's been replaced by other things, but I think we're past there. With the obvious exception of Europe, but I would point out one of the first things that the UK did after it Brexited and, dust washed off its hands. One of the first things they did was legalize GMO food. So there's a lot of appetite. And even in Europe, when you get them alone and a little drunk, the scientists will decry the rule. I remember one strawberry scientist said to me, look, I go to the US, I genetically alter strawberries to get the one I want, then I have to reverse engineer it and try and produce it a different way. And that's really silly. So I think we are moving out of that, but I think it is a really good cautionary tale for everyone moving forward new food innovations.
Peter, what role does plant-based diets play going forward? Do we put a greater focus on plant-based diets, or do we look at this mix between large grazing ruminants, poultry, and so on, along with fish and so on? Do we have to have the mix?
So around plant-based diets, what was that company called?
Perfect Day?
No.
Impossible Meats?
Impossible Meats. So when they first started up, their market cap blew up. They were an $8 billion company. I think today they're barely surviving. So there was a lot of hype around plant-based, and I still think today there is a lot of consumers that want it. But protein is becoming a bigger and bigger part of everyone's diet. So has plant-based companies like Impossible Meats, Perfect Day is another one that came out fast and hard, and also tripped and fell. So I just kind of like this new age stuff needs a lot more investment, a lot more science before they get it where it needs to be.
I'd like to play a clip right now from an interview that I did with Dr. Frank Mitloehner from UC Davis, where he talked about the total amount of arable land in the world, and the ability to be able to produce enough plant-based food seems highly improbable. Arv, can you play that clip from Frank Mitloehner?
Ruminant livestock are actually extremely important with respect to human food supply. And if I may, I just give you a little depiction of this, okay? Imagine this sheet of paper here being the entire surface of the earth. That's all of it, 100%. Now, I fold this sheet of paper, and I will fold it twice until it's roughly the same size as a postcard. What you see now is roughly the total amount of land in the world. The rest is water and ice. That's all land in the world. Now, this here is my business card. The equivalent amount of my business card is all agricultural land. So this here is all land. This is all agricultural land. And if we now take this agricultural land and we fold it into one piece that's 1/3 and the other 2/3, and then rip this business card into pieces, then we have a agricultural land mass that's 2/3 marginal land. And marginal means here you cannot grow crops because either the soil is not of good enough quality or there's not enough water. That land is referred to as marginal land. Okay, so 2/3 of all agricultural land in the world, but also here in North America, is marginal, cannot be used to grow crops. So what do we do with that land? We graze ruminant livestock there. And why? Because they can make use of cellulose-rich feeds. Cellulose is a carbohydrate. They're the only ones that can digest that. Humans and monogastric animals like pigs and poultry cannot. So 2/3 of all agricultural land are marginal, can only be utilized by ruminant livestock. The remaining 1/3 of my business card is what's called arable land. Here you can grow crops for humans and animals. So that's how limited we are with respect to total land in the world that can be used to grow food for people. If we were to forgo the use of ruminant livestock, we would throw away 2/3 of all agricultural land.
Lenore. And then David, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I think I'm known for disagreeing on this. And it gets me in trouble sometimes. But I like to call this the great cow swap, in that only about 9% of cows on Earth are grazed. The rest are eating corn, which is grown on his business card. And I think the problem is, and now it's interesting because globally we do eat plant-based protein by majority. 52% of the Earth's protein portfolio, as I like to call it, is plant-based. Actually, Canada produces a lot of that on the prairies. We have a protein supercluster funded by the government inventing new kinds of plant protein. We also still get a lot of our protein from the ocean, about 18%. The problem with the cows And I think North America's interesting because we will fight to the death for those guys. But the cows on Earth produce maybe 5-8% of the Earth's protein supply, 4 times the greenhouse gas emissions of the entire airline industry. The cows on Earth, and there's about 1 billion of them, graze an area larger than continental US. About the same GHG footprint as the cement industry. If we can't figure out a substitute for beef that will satisfy the American consumer, we will probably lose the carbon fight.
David.
I think we're all going to become flexitarians. I think is maybe a good word, where we're using or consuming beef, we're consuming plant-based and ocean-based proteins and food sources as well. So the blue economy, as kind of alluded to, is a great source of proteins and food, but also energy as well. So looking to the oceans is another way of producing food and having access to other resources, an area we should look at as well.
How do we go about attracting more people to work in the ag sector? Because at the moment, I believe that less than 2% of the Canadian population actually work in the sector. Supal.
Yeah, thanks. I got a good story about that when we were sitting at a BC Ag Council meeting with government, and the topic was how do we get that young generation engaged, into agriculture, because that's is a hot topic we need to solve. So the gentleman, my colleague next to me, he goes, "That's simple. You make it more attractive for the people that are in it right now." So I pause for a second. I go, "That's 100% right." That if our young generation are watching their parents or family members or friends struggle in agriculture, who in their right mind wants to sign up and say, "Yeah, I'll go do that," right? So it can be really put in simple terms that if your current farmers or those in agriculture are struggling and having a tough time, you need to fix that first before you can attract that next generation. And on the side of the staff and the workers currently, I can tell you it's a fact. Without the foreign worker program, there wouldn't be any there hardly be any agriculture in the province. That I know for sure. We just don't have that population here that's available for that work. And if you look at the tree fruit industry, we have these peaks where we need our crop hand harvested. We need that labor. And that labor is not sitting in my town of Kelowna. They're not sitting there waiting for the cherries to be ready. If you're living in Kelowna or anywhere out here, you better be working and earning some money. So it just morphed into that. I kind of laugh where it's called the temporary foreign worker program. That's one of the most consistent things on our farm is bringing the workers from overseas, right? But we're just kind of in this mindset, oh, that's a temporary thing. The reality is it's a permanent thing. On the topic of worker safety, there definitely needs to be some improvements, but we have to be quite careful how we manage that. But definitely more investment from the Canadian government on monitoring and working with growers is definitely something that can help. But yeah, it circles back to that whole investment. If we're making ag healthy and attractive industry to go into business, we've got Lenore's in academics, and we could definitely use more hubs where there's people that are getting educated and bring them onto the farm. We're kind of missing that component as a feeder or the farm team for agriculture.
Peter.
No, I agree with everything that's been said. I'd go even a little bit further. There would be no farms if there wasn't foreign workers today. It is such a drastic shortage of labor. We just can't get people, and if we don't bring them from abroad, we just won't have farms. But, it's about being imaginative, and how do you engage young people into growing food? I'm not going to say farming, I'm going to say growing food. And I was at a agri-tech conference in New York City, and you know the story because I've probably told you 20 times, is I was at this agri-tech conference in Manhattan, and about 350 people, and I was perhaps the oldest person there. No, not perhaps, I actually was the oldest person there. And, I asked all these young people, and they were in their early 30s, late 20s, what do you do? They go, well, we're farmers. I go, what do you mean you're farmers? They go, we grow food. Well, where do you grow food? And where in New York do you do that? See that rooftop? See that that bin at the back? We're growing food there all the time. And that was my aha moment, where I thought to myself, it's not that young people don't want to grow food. They don't want to grow it the way we think you should grow it. A field, a tractor, and a farmer. They're being reimaginative in how they're growing food. This is where I think we have the conventional system that we see as farms versus the unconventional of indoor growing. And I think if you really want to engage young people, this alternate way of growing food is going to really bring in a bunch of young people, because it's exciting. It's not tractors, it's buttons and lab coats, but I think John talked about it. These investments are starting to happen, starting to take place, and it's really capturing young people to get engaged.
Well, one sector, of course, is science and technology. Matthew, you're providing employment. Are you finding it challenging getting the talent that you need to be able to build out your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a ag tech perspective, when I think about, young people coming through biotechnology programs at university, a lot of the skills that they learn in your basic sort of BSc, bachelor's or master's program, those are very transferable to other sectors within the broader sort of umbrella of biotechnology. So that includes pharma, that includes some climate tech stuff, that includes other areas. And so in a lot of cases, things like pharmaceuticals and more traditional biotech ends up winning out in terms of attracting talent. And that's made even more, that situation is exacerbated when you think about students going down and workers going down into the United States, where we have hubs like Boston, San Diego, Seattle, where you have really high wages relative to the cost of living, and it just makes it that much harder for us to attract and retain talent here. But I will say that I think we've made some progress with groups connected to universities, like the BC Centre for Agricultural Innovation connected to SFU, Kwantlen Polytechnic University, UFE, more ag-focused biotechnology programs, I think makes it more attractive for students to understand what is biotechnology all about as it relates to agriculture. And then we just have to keep them in Vancouver, and that's economics.
So is it the cost of labor, or Sean, we've got a question about that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I'd be curious to hear more about the big cost barriers in farming. For example, is the cost of labor, or is it the cost of land that's the bigger challenge? And how can we make it profitable?
I'll come to you in a second, Peter. David, are you hearing this from your clients?
Yeah, for sure. To start, it's the capital upfront. To acquire land is expensive, whether it's in the ALR or not. Once you're up and running, the cost of labor, if you can get it, it's going to be high, especially if it's skilled labor, or you need to look at bringing in temporary foreign workers to help fund that. And it's not cheap. So once you're in, you think you're there, but no, there's other costs of operating that are going to be significant as well.
Peter?
Yeah, our costs since the pandemic have gone up 50%, from fertilizer, from gasoline, from labor, just from chemical, right across the board. Farmers are not like food companies where you pass on cost to the consumer. We can't do that. And we can't pass on our costs. But today, farmers are getting hit so hard by inflation, and if you have debt, but interest. So it is if you have debt, man, you're feeling it. And just from operations in the last 4 years, a 50% increase in cost.
John, the BC Food and Beverage State of the Industry report pointed out that the increase in food prices at the grocery store is not translating in an increase in value to producers. And I know that you had your hand up, but I just thought I'd throw that in there to help shape part of your response.
Okay, I'll give you two responses here. Then the first one being the problem we have here with labor. It's not just here; it's all around the world. It's in the United States. It's in Mexico. It's in Chile. It's in Peru. It's in Brazil. It's in New Zealand. It's in Japan. Everywhere, people are struggling to get labor. Believe it or not, Mexico has to bring labor in from Central America. So everywhere we're around, we're having trouble attracting people into being farmers. And so as a result of that, obviously competition is higher and you got to pay more. So those costs are continuing to rise up. And so I don't see that. So you talk about a global food shortage, that's what it's going to come from, is not enough labor around the world to be able to produce the products we need to. And the other problem we have right now is that, honestly, during the pandemic, we were able to pass on, at the beginning of the pandemic, the prices of our product to retail. And the consumer was accepting of it as they were sitting at home and their costs were lower and they could afford to pay for it. And they do it in and out of the grocery store and back and didn't really check on prices. Since then, there's big pushback at retail. So our retailers are pushing back on us and saying, no, we're not going to take the price increases anymore. As a matter of fact, how can we reduce the price? So those are the challenges we have right now. And so it isn't an easy formula. And we're also in a global environment. So if there's a shortage of supply somewhere around the world, people can move it from one place to the other. And as a result of that, prices in some cases when there's shortage go up. And it's a challenge for sure to balance all those things.
Sean, there's a question here from Simon Holt about wanting to talk about the other big cost barriers. And I know that it's a little bit along the same line.
It is. I'd be curious to hear more about the big cost barriers in farming. For example, that was the same one. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
But he's really speaking to, what are the big costs in farming? What's driving costs in farming and processing and making those such challenging sectors right now?
David.
Yeah. So I think again, you're up, running, and it was mentioned before, in order for farmers to continue to farm, they need to make a living wage and be profitable. They also need to invest in their farms to be more efficient, to be able to grow more food, leveraging ag technologies or biologicals. Same thing for food processors. It's looking at those costs and how you can help reduce those costs, be more efficient in your production and processing of food. So when that product hits that retail shelf, it's at a price point that the consumers can actually afford it and will buy it.
So we're getting close to the end, and I would like to ask each of you for a closing comment. What are the most important next steps as far as each of you are concerned, for us to be able to start to move forward in British Columbia to meet our own food requirements? Because as I understand it right now, we're lucky if we're producing 34% of our own food. So that's a big gap. John, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to work our way back down the panel here.
Yeah, certainly there has to be some government regulation and help and investment into the industry for us to be able to continue to produce the food for ourselves. For an example, let's just say you're an apple orchard up in the Okanagan or a cherry orchard, and you need to look at the old varieties of cherries that you've been growing are no longer able to be grown profitably in the current environment. And I'm talking about the weather environment and the consumer's wants. So if you want to put some new cherry varieties in, you don't get anything back from the investment you put in those trees for 3 to 5 years. Same with apples, same with all kinds of different products. There are other parts of the world you can get it done quicker because of the weather patterns. Like in Peru, it takes 3 years to get your grapes done. In Chile, it takes 4 to 5. But during that period of time, how does the farmer get revenue and keep going? So I think we need some assistance in being able to
help us be able to put these new varieties of product in that are more efficient and tastier, and they last longer, and the consumer will be happier with it. So they'll want to they'll want to eat more. We can produce more because we're doing more efficiently with new varieties.
Sukhpal.
Yeah, I think, on the big picture, what we can do is actually, call it a agri-food strategy. So bring in all the stakeholders from farm to table, everybody involved in agriculture, make it a big table and hear what each segment has to bring, and develop a strong strategy that has agriculture as a strong priority. Going back to, as I mentioned, we've got the ALR, we talk about these, we've got fertile land, we want to do this, we want to do that, we support farming. Well, now's the time to take action so that we see that things are being tough around the world with other climate events happening. It's just not us, it's everywhere. But if we have some leadership that takes that proactive measure and makes sure that farmers are healthy, because I'm of the view that if your ag sector farmers are doing well and healthy, there'll be a ripple effect, positive effect throughout society. We've got some desperate issues that we're trying to solve within society. But I think a good starting point is make sure we have a strong food system that we can, hey, if we're producing good, strong quality food, we can get that to the people in need because we're not struggling, right? So it's an agri-food strategy. The BC Ag Council represents the vast majority of producers. We've got the food and beverage processors. So bringing those groups to the table and relying on the experts that know about the industry. And I think it just takes that willingness from the government to make that commitment. And I'm a strong believer that if they invest that money, we'd be shocked on what we can produce and how much of we'll be a global leader, as other reports have said we have the potential to. We just need that initial belief from government and the general public to push that, because going back to how many farmers are out there, it used to be that, oh, my uncle farms, or we have a family farm, Now that's no longer the case, right? People are removed from that. And is that just under 2%, or it's in the 1% range that are connected to the farm? So farmers aren't swaying any elections anymore. We don't have that big voice that we had, 50, 60 years ago. But we're still doing that very important thing of producing food. I don't know anybody here who's had a lab-produced meal lately, but I don't think anybody here, right? It's okay. Well,
yeah, dinner on Mars.
Yeah. So yeah, but I rather be eating the food that's from the dirt, as healthy as possible. And I think that's gonna need the general public to be pushing this as well, because the farmers alone were a small percentage, but give us the right tools, climate mitigation tools, help us, fight against the climate. Cherry growers, we'll fight. We send helicopters out there to dry rain off of our cherries to keep them in good condition. So we're willing to fight, but we just need some more support. And I think that's the right approach to go.
David.
Well, we're not producing any more land. So if we need to produce more food, this is where I think the role of ag technology is really going to, take us there. We, in all sectors, but particularly in food, we're on the cusp, or we're probably here already, of a technology evolution. So it's not just ag technologies, but looking at artificial intelligence, generative AI. There's a number of applications that are just going to advance the food sector so quickly. It's going to be mind-blowing in terms of what we are able to do leveraging technology and produce food differently, produce more food more efficiently, so it's affordable for the consumers, and be able for us as a global food economy to feed the global population.
Matthew, that's a perfect segue to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I appreciate the great innovation technology segue. So I think for me, from that ag tech innovation perspective, it really comes down to two things, and we've kind of touched on at least one of them already. The first is that sort of regulatory framework that's necessary to promote and encourage and foster innovation. With that, we can really think about how do we protect ourselves as a country, as a society, but at the same time allow new innovative products to actually come to market and incentivize companies who have limited financial resources and limited runway to be able to actually invest what they need to and see a return on that investment in a reasonable amount of time. And so the second thing really is sort of an extension of that. And for me, I think we've heard a lot about how hard it is to grow food, how expensive it is for growers to produce food, and the idea that, when growers have their livelihoods on the line and the margins are already so razor thin, getting them to try new products is somewhat of a challenge. I think growers are an innovative bunch. They want to see innovation and they want to move their businesses, their farms forward. But again, when margins are so thin, it's challenging. So what ends up happening is I have growers who say, yeah, I'll do a small limited test plot 1 year. And then if that works well, I'll expand that to maybe 5 acres or 10 acres, and then maybe 100 acres the next year. And it's this very slow adoption curve for new technology once it gets into the marketplace. And so some sort of government program, subsidy, incentive, whatever you want to call it, but to help growers actually embrace new technologies more quickly and more aggressively than they otherwise would. And, I think that would go a long way.
Lenore.
Yeah, and it's echoing what the panel's been saying, but I think I would wrap it up by saying the food system is the most important industry on earth. Civilizations that forget this do poorly. And it also is one of the most exciting times to be in ag tech and agriculture and technology in the last 1,000 years. It is incredible what we can do. And the one thing I would say we need a national vision, because the countries that are winning this race have them. We need a provincial strategy because the regions that are winning have them. And the last thing I would say is we often talk about the Netherlands and Singapore, but the sleeper, the actual world food superpower is California. And that comes to a hub in the Silicon Valley, and people forget that. Yes, it's a tech superpower region. It is also a food superpower region. And when those two things play together, amazing things happen. And that is where we need to aim.
Lenore, do we need a major post-secondary institutional presence in agriculture here in British Columbia?
Yes, we do. And my region would yell at me if I didn't say it should be in the Fraser Valley.
Peter.
Stu, I just want to say thank you for doing this again. I think this is such an important topic. And, it's not just a farmer's issue. It's not just a processor's issue. It's a humanity issue. And believe it, these are the conversations that really, hopefully inspires you to go talk to 5 people tonight who keep talking, because, some of the solutions that we're talking about are not that difficult to achieve. We just have to have, the wherewithal to make some of these difficult decisions. But it's conversations like this that actually make all of you understand that we're heading to a global food crisis, and it's going to be everyone's problem. So these are the platforms that I think, who you talk to, who you mix with, have these conversations, because what you've heard today is pretty serious, is pretty dire. So I just want to say thank you to you for allowing us to come here this evening and have this conversation.
Thank you, Peter. It's a complex topic. We're going to come back to it next season for sure, because in doing my research about how do we feed the world through to 2050, one of the top items was reduce food waste. And we didn't get a chance to really pay a lot of attention to that. Another was don't use agricultural land to grow biofuels. Like, it's a poor exchange of energy for energy. Use that land to produce food. And then, of course, when we come back, we will talk about fish, because one of the other recommendations is we need to pay a lot more attention to the raising of fish, which is interesting to note today that the news came out that the federal government has now said we're issuing 5-year non-extendable licenses on fish farming in British Columbia, and then that's it. We're shutting down sea-based fish farms, all in favor of going onshore, ahead of the technology being ready to do that. So how are we going to grow that food? There's so many more questions, and we will come back to that again. I want to thank all of you for your time today. You've got the coveted Conversations Live mug, which I encourage you to take home with you. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Thank you to everybody for watching online, and we'll see you again in September. Good night. Thank you for tuning into Conversations Live, an Oh Boy Productions program. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can find our previous and upcoming episodes at conversationslive.ca. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, thank you. I'm Stuart McNish.